Hi, welcome to our presentation on the criminal justice system.
So our thesis is, although prisons have become a permanent part of the American justice system, current incarceration and release methods are doing more harm than good.
So one of the main problems with the criminal justice system is wrongful conviction, and the leading cause of this is eyewitness misidentification, since the human memory can be easily manipulated by suggested information. Elizabeth Loftus, a memory manipulation expert, actually conducted some experiments to test this theory. So she conducted a car crash simulation, and after which the participants were asked one of two questions. Either A, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, or B, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. If the participants were asked the smashed question, they were more likely to say that the cars were going faster and that they remember there being glass on the scene, which there wasn't. This shows how memories can be manipulated, especially in a trial or prosecution like a stressful event. This chart shows that out of the 175 eyewitness misidentification cases of the first 239 DNA exonerations, 62% only had one witness. Another leading cause is false confessions. Actually, 18% of the exonerated population pleaded guilty despite being innocent. One reason for this is the Reid technique, which is commonly taught throughout America. It uses different forms of lying, such as fake polygraphs and fake evidence, to coerce the suspect into a confession.
So this leads to the unfair treatment of prisoners. Many experts state that prisoners are coming out more damaged than previously when they initially came into the prisons. And this is because sexual, mental, and physical abuse is extremely common. For example, women suffered more sexual abuse than men, with 22% inflicted by other inmates and 33% inflicted by the staff. And as you can see from this chart, of the 120 abuse cases brought up against guards, only 8 of those guards were dismissed, which shows that only 7% of these issues were fully addressed. And then this also leads to prison quality. There is severe overcrowding in most prisons, with some having above 20% of people above their capacity. This leads to understaffing and underfunding. All these issues lead to increased health risks, such as MRSA, AIDS/HIV, various STDs, and hepatitis. And this also leads to poor prison food quality. For example, in the state of Washington, four of the food group requirements are not met. And then this leads to chronic illnesses, such as increased chronic illnesses in inmates, with 30% having hypertension, 10% having heart problems, and 9% have diabetes, all these being higher than the general public.
Okay, as shown in this graph, the number of incarcerated mentally ill are increasing over the years as they have higher risks of committing crimes. So one problem is that these mentally ill are left undertreated or untreated because most prisons only have basic medical care. They don't have staff trained in dealing with aggressive outbreaks and medical resources and medications like hospitals do. And these basic prison services require payments, which deters most prisoners from seeking medical aid. Another problem is that symptoms of mental disorders like hallucinations, suicide attempts, they're amplified by prison officials' use of excessive force and violence to try to deal with these aggressive outbreaks, which they call disobedience. As you see in this graph, more mentally ill are incarcerated than left in hospitals, and so now prisons are commonly called the new asylums. And so this was intended to reduce the cost of treating mentally ill in hospitals, but long-term incarceration requires more funds and costs taxpayers twice as much because most mentally ill, due to a lack of reform, engage in cycles of recidivism in which they're released but then commit another crime and are readmitted to the prisons, and then they have to go through incarceration all over again.
The practice of capital punishment, or the death penalty, leads to negative effects on the U.S. economy and on the rights of its citizens. According to a study done by Professor Mitchell and Judge Alcaron from the Loyola Law School, it was found that the cost of trials and pre-trials totaled to $1.94 billion, while the cost of state appeals to $925 million. The total incarceration methods cost to $1 billion. If the governor commuted death row sentences to life without parole, this would cause an immediate savings of $170 million per year, or a total of $5 billion over 20 years. The state government is being forced to cut down on social services, schools, parks, and healthcare to pay for these unreasonable amount of costs. The The Eighth Amendment in the Bill of Rights prohibits the government from cruel and unusual punishment or forms of torture. The cases where the executions took longer than expected to work are known as botched executions, such as the cases of Joseph R. Wood and Lockett. In these cases, the drugs took longer than expected to work, leading to a lengthy, painfully cruel death. This is seen as a form of torture because of the unnecessary amount of pain caused before the death. Spending long periods of time isolated away from family, friends, other humans, and communication, and the thought of their imminent death leads to the death row phenomenon, which is also a form of mental torture for death row inmates.
Okay, so American lifestyle has always been influenced by the ability to vote. However, ever since before the Civil War, disenfranchisement laws, which are part of the flawed criminal justice system and deprive a person from being able to vote, have become a major issue, mainly targeting criminals and ex-criminals. And currently, today, the U.S. has the most restrictive disenfranchisement laws, which explains why 48 of the states don't allow felons who are in prison to vote, with the exception of Maine and Vermont, who allow everyone to vote. And then in other states, there's different applications of these laws. So some states don't allow felons who are on probation or parole to vote. Some only allow them to vote once they're out of prison, and some just permanently disenfranchise them. And as a result of these laws, 6.1 million people are barred from voting in the U.S. And this image just shows how the laws are distributed across the United States and how they're applied. Okay. So according to Erica Stern, ever since the 19th century, discriminatory tactics were used mainly to target and disenfranchise the minority population. So for example, governments implemented poll taxes, which was used for disenfranchising the poor, and they also used unfair literacy tests, which was mainly for the African American population. And then nowadays, the African American race has the highest rates of disenfranchised felons, with 1 out of every 13 African American being disenfranchised. And this is mainly due to the war on drugs, which occurred during the 1980s, where blacks were being arrested for drug-related offenses at a rate 5 times more than the white population. And in addition, these laws increase the chance of low-income people to becoming disenfranchised compared to the high-income population.
Okay, one of our proposed solutions is that prisons should target reform rather than punishment, and one of the branches of this is increasing the specialization of medical care and increasing its accessibilities and medications and resources that are available. This would greatly increase the mentally ill that are incarcerated, and as well as cycles of recidivism.
The increased medical care would also lead to an increase in the development of safer, more effective drugs to be used during the death penalty, leading to a decrease in the amount of botched execution and decrease the suffering caused to these inmates.
Another thing that would help this is further training of the staff and implementation of more staff members in these prisons.
However, one limitation is that this would cost taxpayers more because it requires higher finances.
In addition, another solution we had is that felon disenfranchisement should be based on the degree of the crime that's committed. And a limitation to this is that since every state has its own individual laws and applications of these laws, there is a bias when determining the degree of the crime.
And the last of our proposed solutions is that new technologies such as DNA testing should be utilized to ensure a fair trial. But the downside of this is more time and more money has to be used.
These are our work cited. Thank you.
Ready for questions? Yes. All right. So, I'll start with you, Rachel. In what way did you improve your ability to work with a group as a result of this project?
I think that at the beginning of the project, deciding on the topic and our individual subtopics was kind of a challenge for us since we all had so many ideas. But once we decided on the topic that we all liked, it was really easy for us all to collaborate and work together.
Let's see. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem?
Well, I think like overall, like all of our topics kind of had like a big impact on our topic because they all relate back to the flaws in the criminal justice system. But I definitely think like Rachel's topic had the most influence because hers had to do with convicting felons, like wrongfully convicting felons, and that kind of like leads to the other flaws inside the criminal justice system.
Okay. What was the strongest counter argument to the solution you guys identified?
So the strongest counterargument for all of our solutions was that all of these solutions costed more money and more taxes for the society to pay, which most people do not want.
Okay. Describe how the content of the team presentation changed because of a group discussion.
Well, I think when we were first looking at it, we only were seeing it through mostly an ethical lens. And then we saw more of a political lens with the felon disenfranchisement as well as economic, because all of them we've seen that can be limited by expenses.
Okay. In which, what is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research project?
So my individual research project, I originally wanted a solution that would lower the cost, but after seeing everyone else's and we all combine to form solutions that actually would higher the cost, which changed my view of my primary solution and made me think of alternate solutions.
Okay. All right, thank you, ladies.